Now we're about to begin, okay? The first thing I want you to know is Allah says He gave hikmah to all prophets. He actually mentions this. أَخَذَ اللَّهُ مِيثَاقَ النَّبِيِّينَ لَمَا آتَيْتُكُم مِّن كِتَابٍ وَحِكْمَةٍ. Allah took a promise for all the prophets that whenever I give you any book or any wisdom. So He mentioned wisdom for all prophets first. Okay, so that's one. Then He mentioned it especially for the family of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So Allah says, so He says, فَقَدْ آتَيْنَا آلَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ الْحِكْمَةَ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ. We gave the family of Ibrahim the book and the wisdom. So the book and the wisdom are part of the family of Ibrahim alayhi salam. By the way, Dawud alayhi salam and Isa alayhi salam and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi salam are all the family of who? Ibrahim alayhi salam, right? So there's already a connection. Okay. Of course, I already mentioned Dawud alayhi salam to you. He's given hikmah. Isa alayhi salam is given hikmah. Then our messenger is given hikmah in multiple ways. The hikmah given to him is described. But then there are two cases in the Quran where hikmah is given to people that are not prophets. This is where things get really interesting. Hikmah given to people that are not prophets. The first one is actually, it could be anybody. Allah says, يُؤْتِ الْحِكْمَةَ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. He gives hikmah to whoever He wants. He gives hikmah to whoever He wants. وَمَنْ يُؤْتَ الْحِكْمَةَ فَقَدْ أُوتِيَ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. And whoever has been given hikmah has been given an amazing amount, a great amount of good. Now in this ayah, Allah mentions that He can give hikmah to who? Anyone. So I can get it, you can get it, anybody can get it. Anybody can have it, right? So we're going to have to then, this creates a problem. The problem is, now there's a kind of hikmah that He gives to prophets. And then there's another kind of hikmah that He gives to everyone. What's the difference between them? What's the relationship between them? It's the same word. So how do we understand the connection between these two, okay? And then of course there's one last one, and that's Luqman radiallahu anhu. So in Surah Luqman, very famous individual is mentioned. His name is Luqman. Before Islam, he was a famous figure. Some argue he was not even an Arab. So he's a non-Arabian figure. But he was famous for his wisdom and for solving disputes between people and for his kind and wise words. And the Quran actually acknowledges that this person that's famously known for his wisdom actually did have wisdom. And he used a lot of that wisdom when he was advising his own son. And so Allah gave us a passage about Luqman giving advice to his son in Surah Luqman. But when Allah says we gave Luqman wisdom, it's actually giving wisdom to someone who is not a prophet. He's not a prophet. And so that's going to become an interesting study too. What does wisdom mean when it's given to not a prophet? And what does wisdom mean when it's given to a prophet? What's the difference between them, okay? Now, I've done this part to you. Now we're going to get to the definition of hikmah and you'll get your first break. There's actually lots of parts to this, so this is going to be fun. I promise you this is the boring part, okay? Promise you. Let me first go through what this means. The meaning of the word hikmah in the Arabic language. This is called the lexical meaning. Lexical is a big word. I use that to make you feel stupid. I hope it worked. I hope you feel like you don't have a good education and you feel bad about yourself and you're Googling the word right now on your phones. Let me just tell you what lexical means. It just means dictionary meaning. Lexical just means dictionary. Now you sound smart. Now you can go home and say, by the way, the lexical meaning of hikmah. And your family will like, oh, I know it comes. Okay. The thing about the Arabic language is you'll have a word, but that word comes from a bunch of other words that don't seem related, but they have the same letters. So some of you may be familiar with the idea of root letters in Arabic. Hikmah is made up of ha, kaf, and mim. Ha, kaf, and mim. Those three letters have a whole bunch of history behind them. There's a lot of words that come from them, and those different words, they help us understand the concept of hikmah in the mind of the Arabs. Why did they connect these two ideas together? Let me make this simpler for you first, before we get into the lexical meaning, okay? The word aql, which is also, Urdu speakers here will know what aql is. What's aql? थोड़ा अकल इस्तेमाल करें, बताएं जरा. Huh? The intellect. Aql means intellect. Aqala in Arabic means to tie something up. It means to tie something up. And it used to be used for a rope that you use to tie a camel. And the Arabs used to have, they didn't have anti-lock brakes on their camels. So they used to put a rope around their head. And when they went somewhere, they took the rope off their head and they tied the camel with it. And that rope was called a iqal. A iqal. So it used to be on their what? On their head. And they used it for control. The control or restraint of an animal. A leash on an animal. From it came the idea of the word aql. The intellect. One, because it's here. Two, because it's something that puts you under control. You're able to control your anger because of your intellect. You're able to control your stupidity because of your intellect. You're able to control your tongue because of your intellect. You're able to control your hands because of your intellect. So to them, intellect means the ability to control your emotions or the ability to control yourself. So you see what they did? They took this image and they associated it with the word intellect. Now, we don't do that in English, right? So the word intellect may have some interesting etymology, but we don't necessarily see that connection. But words in the Quran, they have this connection behind them. So we're going to try to find that connection for the word hikmah. Hikmah actually comes from hakamatul lijam. The picture is pretty dark. You know the horses, they put this muzzle on their face and they can pull with the rope on the muzzle on the face and they control its face with it. That's called a hakama. And a hakama is also the chin of a person. This bottom jaw and this chin, that's actually called a hakama. It's also the chin of a sheep or a horse or a person. These are all called hakama. Now, why is that important? This part is set to hold your face together. Okay, this is supposed to hold your face together. So, you know, if somebody gets a chin injury or something drastic happens in a car accident, they're not able to hold the muscles and the jawline and everything. It starts falling apart. This is actually holding things together and securing them. Okay, and the bridle on a horse that you're pulling on, that's holding the horse, restraining the horse. Just like the jaw is restraining your face. It's keeping things intact, you know, and not letting the delicate muscles inside fall apart. Now, from it came the idea that hakam, al-man'u min at-tafakkuk wa at-tasayyub, سواء كانت مادية أو معنوية أو كلاما. I wrote Arabic here to make you feel bad and to show off I could read Arabic. But no, I wrote this for myself and I was too lazy to translate. So I'll translate it in person. I'll tell you what this means. It means, the word hakam means when you keep something from falling apart. When you keep something from falling apart, okay? And whether it's something physically falling apart or something intellectually falling apart, meaning when you speak in a way where your argument doesn't fall apart, you used hikmah in your argument. When you wrote an essay and your ideas were well connected to each other and your thesis didn't fall apart, then you had hakam or hikmah in your speech. When a lawyer is trying to win a case, right, and they make their case really solid, and it didn't fall apart, and that's because they were hakam in their presentation. Sometimes you have a class presentation, many university students here who have no purpose in life other than, you know, so when you have your school presentation, sometimes you're in the middle of your presentation, you forget everything. And then your laptop dies. And then, yeah, some people got bad memories. Oh, I remember that day. Yeah, and osmosis, it's got a mosis in it. And that means it fell apart. Anyway, that's the lexical meaning. Now, let's go to some other interesting early Islamic dictionaries. These are like, you know, first century, second century of Islam, scholars that were writing the dictionaries of the words in the Quran. How are they defining hikmah? How are they defining wisdom? By the way, the idea of holding something together, keep that in mind. Okay, so the idea of hikmah has to do with securing something. We'll tie those concepts later. So, in Tafsir Gharib al-Quran, li Zayd ibn Ali, al-hikmah, al-amana, wal-bayan, wal-fiqh, wal-aql, wal-fahm. He says hikmah is trustworthiness, His definition is, one definition, hikmah means trustworthiness. It means clarity in speech. It means understanding. It means intellect. And it means, basically another word for understanding. So understanding, intellect, trustworthiness, and clarity in speech. If you have those things, you have what? Hikmah. That's his definition. Another definition, al-wujuh wal-nadhair. Al-mawa'idh, al-fahm wal-aql, al-nubuwah, as I just mistyped. Good advice. Good advice is hikmah. And then he says understanding and knowledge is hikmah. And then he says prophethood is also hikmah, which makes sense because Allah actually mentioned in the Quran that he gave Ibrahim hikmah, which means he gave Ibrahim prophethood, isn't it? So that's actually an example of hikmah. He also mentions in Al-Muqatil mentions tafsirul Quran wal Quran, meaning understanding the Quran or explaining the Quran itself is also hikmah. So one of his definitions of hikmah was the Quran itself. Gharib al-Quran, Ibn Qutaybah, he says al-ilm wal-amal. Interesting definition. He says hikmah means knowing something and acting on it. Sounds really easy. Knowing something and what? Acting on it. Hey, you got to tell your dad what happened. I know. I'm working on it. Well, when people say I'm working on it, you know what that means, right? I don't want to do it, but I want to sound like I'm doing something. So I'm going to say I'm working on it. How are you working on it exactly? It's a process. What's the process? It's a struggle. So can you define the struggle for me? Yeah, it's like, just leave me alone. I'm working on it. That's my favorite one. I know I have to do it, but it's a process and it's a struggle and I'm working on it. You know what that is? That's knowing something, but not what? You're not acting on it. That's a lack of hikmah. That's a lack of hikmah. Okay? So then, Gharib al-Quran, he says, actually, Al-Ain li Khalid ibn, actually it's Khalil ibn Ahmad. One of the earliest, maybe even the earliest dictionary of the Arabic language, he translated wisdom as justice. His definition of wisdom was actually justice. It's really cool. Because you know what justice is? You put things where they belong. Right? You put things where they belong. You don't misplace something. And that's why later definitions of hikmah became in Islamic history. Hikmah also got defined as putting something where it belongs. Putting your anger where it belongs. Putting your criticism where it belongs. Putting your praise where it belongs. Putting your hard work where it belongs. Putting your money where it belongs. Right? And you're putting your effort where it belongs. Putting everything where it belongs, that would become hikmah, and so that became a definition, justice. Now we're going to look, so we looked at the lexical meaning, we looked at the early writers of the dictionaries and what they said about wisdom. Now we're going to look at the philosophical definition. This is coming not just from Islamic literature, but it's also coming from Christian literature. The Christians in the era of Islam, or the few centuries before Islam, they were obsessed with the subject of wisdom. You might not know that, but now you do. Christianity, one of its main focuses was the subject of what? Wisdom. And I'll give it away. They were so obsessed with wisdom, and of course you all know they were also obsessed with Jesus, that they actually made them into one subject, and they developed literature, especially in Proverbs and other places, where they said Jesus is wisdom itself walking around. So in many of their works, when they would talk about wisdom, they were actually talking about Jesus. They called him wisdom itself. Wisdom itself, wisdom manifest. So wisdom is a major subject for them. But they talked about it in many different ways, and of course philosophers have talked about it in different ways. I'm going to give you a definition of wisdom that they have that actually agrees with the Quran. The Quran offers the same definition in this case, not the one that they say Jesus is wisdom. The Quran changes that and says, no, Jesus is not wisdom. Jesus is given wisdom. So the Quran says, oh, correction, let's fix that a little bit. Okay, and that's what the Quran does all the time. It takes a statement from Christian literature and a statement from Jewish literature, and the statement is almost correct with a few adjustments, and the Quran will make those few adjustments. Okay, now we got it right. Okay, so that's what the Quran does in this case too. But anyway, their definition, now listen to this part carefully because this will be one of the most important discussions for the entire 2 days. Their definition is every human being has something inside them that tells them right from wrong. Every human being. It doesn't matter what religion they are. It doesn't matter where they were raised, what century they were raised in. They have something inside them that says hurting someone else is wrong. Cheating someone else is wrong. Lying is wrong. Deceiving is wrong. Taking somebody else's rights is wrong. Oppressing someone is wrong. There are things that you don't have to be Muslim to know that they're wrong. Anybody could be walking around and they see some kids yelling at a kid or bullying a child, and you will know that that's wrong. You'll say, let me check with the fuqaha first. Let me ask my mufti if, Sheikh, if a bunch of kids are beating up a kid in school, is that haram? Nobody has to check that. There's a meter inside you that says, hey, that is what? You could just see that it's wrong. When you're standing in line and you're awaiting your turn, and somebody cuts somebody in line, everybody in line says it's wrong, unless you're in the Arab world. But in Pakistan, otherwise but it's wrong, and you can tell. There's an understanding of people's place, right? So the Christian argument is actually we have a basic sense of right and wrong inside of us. Now let's talk about the Quran point of view on this. This is the fitra, fitrat Allah allati fatara an-nasa alayha, the fitra with which Allah created us. And that fitra is so powerful, that nature inside us is so powerful that Allah made us with, that Allah says, He swears by it, وَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِالنَّفْسِ اللَّوَّامَةِ, I swear by the person that blames themselves. Meaning, if nobody was around, and nobody could check what you're doing, and you're about to do the wrong thing, right? Something in you says, don't do this. Something in you feels bad. And you have to silence that, put it on airplane mode. You have to mute it to be able to go ahead. But it was there. The voice is there. The way Allah describes that voice inside you and inside me and inside every human being, in Surah An-Nur, He describes a person who's drowning in the ocean. And they keep drowning deeper and deeper. And there's waves on top, and it's a cloudy night, and it's raining. So there's no moonlight, there's no starlight, and the deeper you go in the ocean, the darker it gets. And he gets to almost the bottom of the ocean, and Allah says, إِذَا أَخْرَجَ يَدَهُ لَمْ يَكَدْ يَرَاهَا. When He takes His hand out right in front of him, he almost can't see it. He doesn't say he can't see it. He says what? He almost can't see it. You know what that means? Something is still there. No matter how dark you got. Somebody got into a club. Somebody started drinking. Somebody started doing drugs. Somebody's been drinking for a year now. They're picking up the bottle for the 1,000th time. And before they bring it to their mouth, something in them says, I shouldn't be doing this. Something goes off. And it's weak. The alarm is weak. The batteries are weak, but they're not dead. You could still see that it's there. So that consciousness that we have, you can call it a conscience, you can call it a moral compass, right? You can call it, in Urdu, they say, Mera zamir mujhe tang kar raha hai, right? Your inner self, right? This, and an-nafs al-lawwama in the Quran, actually the Christian literature called it Hikmah itself. There's a sense of justice inside you and inside me. Now, this is going to be a really interesting thing. Now we're learning, Allah teaches Hikmah, doesn't He? He taught Hikmah to Ibrahim alayhi salam. He taught Hikmah to Dawud alayhi salam. He taught Hikmah to Isa alayhi salam. He taught Hikmah to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi salam. But now Allah is also saying every human being already has some level of what inside them? Some Hikmah is already inside them. There's an inside Hikmah and there's an outside Hikmah. There's two of them. And we're going to have to figure out what the relationship between those two guys is, or those two Hikmahs is. Okay, now, this is real. This was on the Jewish side. The previous one was on the Christian side. Now I'm going to show you something on the Jewish side of things. A couple of 100 years before Jesus, and carrying forward, the Jews also became very interested in the subject of wisdom. But their definition of wisdom was really different. Really different. they developed this idea that wisdom actually means that some special people, some elite people, they have secret knowledge about Judgment Day. They know Judgment Day is coming. They know details about Judgment Day and the end of the world. But that knowledge is not for everyone. It is for very exclusive, special groups of people. And those people have what? Hikmah. So actually, hidden knowledge of what's going to happen when the world comes to an end. Hidden, exclusive, special knowledge. Okay? Now, what did the Quran do to respond to this idea? Because remember, when the Quran said Hikmah, were the Jews also listening? Were they in the audience? Yeah. And when they heard Hikmah, what came in their head? If they're part of this culture, they're like, this refers to secret knowledge of the end of the world. And Allah says in Surah Al-Qamar, when He says, اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر, when the hour has come near, the moon shall split. وَإِن يَرَوْا آيَةً يُعْرِضُوا وَيَقُولُوا سِحْرٌ مُسْتَمِرٌ وَكَذَّبُوا وَاتَّبَعُوا أَهْوَاءَهُمْ وَكُلُّ أَمْرٍ مُسْتَقِرٌ. Listen to this part. I'll translate this part. وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُمْ مِنَ الْأَنْبَاءِ مَا فِيهِ مُزْدَجَرٌ. And they have received news that have a lot of warnings in them. حِكْمَةٌ بَالِغَةٌ فَمَا تُغْنِ النُّذُرُ. Wisdom that reaches everybody, but none of the warnings have benefited. What is Allah doing now? Allah is saying there are warnings, but they're warnings of Judgment Day, but they're not for some special, exclusive group of people who have access to this secret hikmah, classified documents that nobody else gets. Allah called it hikmatun balighatun fama tughni nudhur. This is a hikmah that has been made accessible and shall reach everyone. And even though it's reaching everybody, people are not taking advantage of the warnings. So what did Allah do? Allah took the concept of hikmah that the Jewish community had and redefined it not as elite and exclusive, but as what? Public access. It's actually meant for everybody, right? So the quick lesson now, the Christian concept of hikmah was about inner hikmah. The Jewish concept of hikmah was about secret knowledge of the afterlife. The Quran is actually going to deal with both of them in its discussion. Because you have to remember, we think of Muslims, we think of the Quran as something that's talking to us. But actually the Quran is talking to the Christians. And it's also talking to the Jews. And it's also talking to the mushrikun. It's actually talking to everybody. And Allah knows everybody's background. Allah knows everybody's culture, everybody's religious upbringing. And knowing that, He speaks. And when He speaks, it hits them differently because He's saying things we didn't catch on to it because we don't come from that background. So it doesn't hit us. So sometimes Allah will say an ayah and there's a Sahabi who's listening to it. He understands it. But there's another Sahabi who used to be Jewish and he hears it. He goes, whoa, Allah just commented on something I learned in Saturday school. You know, my rabbi taught me this and Allah just corrected it right now. We wouldn't know that. They would know that. You understand? So that's become a really interesting study in learning the Quran also in regards to hikmah. Almost done, guys, and I'll give you your first break. Okay. So wisdom contrasts with law. Now let's talk about that. In the Bible, now we're talking about the common denominator between the Jews and the Christians, the Old Testament. Okay. So the Bible is common to both religions. And in the Bible, especially in Proverbs, there's actually this, they talk about wisdom as if it's a lady. That's, you have to respect her. Okay, they don't talk about wisdom as a concept, they talk about it as lady wisdom. Okay? And what is lady wisdom? Basically, it means the things you need to do to live a good life, pay attention to your life experiences, pay attention to what happened, learn the lessons from the tragedies in your life, learn the lessons from how you were deceived, or how you experienced the death of a loved one, or how you experienced sickness, or whatever trial you went through in life will teach you wisdom. Listen to your elders, listen to your parents. All of that will be called wisdom. So the wisdom, in this definition, wisdom doesn't have to do with the book. It just has to do with your life, doesn't it? It just contemplate your life, pay attention to the world around you, and you will get wisdom. And if you get this wisdom, which anybody can do, you'll lead a good life. This is in the Bible. And Job comes along and says, that doesn't make any sense. So Job actually argues against this and says, you're saying if I live by wisdom, I'll have a good life. I know a lot of wise people that have a really tough life. How are you saying it's going to be a good life? And then the Bible has a debate with Job and eventually gets to the point where Job is being told, no, no, no. This means eventually it'll be a good life. Maybe it'll be a good life in the next life. Now the Quran solves this problem. You know, let me tell you where Muslims come into play here. And this will be your break now. People come and say, Ustad, I pray, I fast, I stay away from haram stuff, I eat halal food, I make halal money. Why do I have all these problems? I make so much, I even pray tahajjud, I fast Mondays and Thursdays, I do so much dua, and my problems just don't go away. What's the point of doing all this ibadah? And I'm doing all the right things, but everything keeps going wrong in my life. In fact, the more I do, it seems like the better I do in Islam, the worse my life gets. And this is very common, actually. And someone even told me, you know, the lesser I follow Islam, the easier my life gets. I mean, I don't want to say I know Allah is listening. And they did this. I was like, is this going to help? Like, should we go in this corner? Like the angels are like, oh wait, oh, they went to the corner. Darn it, I can't write this down. But the idea, you know, when I start praying, things get really hard. When I stop praying, things get easy. I'm just saying, that's what it is. I was like, okay. Who told you that if you obey Allah, life will get easy? Because the Quran never did. Proverbs is saying, live your life according to wisdom, life will be good. The Quran ever said that? The Quran ever made you a promise? If you live a good life, if you live a moral life, if you live a life by the commandments of Allah, that you will actually live prosperously and great things will happen to you. Does he do that? Not really. No. He says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ. Human beings were created in exhaustive labor. And then he gives us examples. Okay, fine. Let's take the examples of the people who followed Allah the most. Okay, Ibrahim alayhi salam really followed Allah. His life was super easy, right? Oh, wait. Yusuf alayhi salam, he lived by wisdom. He never broke any rules. He did good. So his life was really, wait, there's a theme emerging in the Quran. Really great people that live by wisdom have really tough lives, don't they? Then there's somebody, and when I explained this to this person who was trying to find a no cell phone connection zone, they said, then what's the point? Life's going to be hard anyway. What's the point? I was like, now you're asking the real question. What is the point? Allah did not put me on this earth to have an easy life. Allah put me on this earth to pass a test. That's why He put me on this earth. And there are people who have the wisdom to understand that, and there are people who just don't want to understand that and want to have what? An easy life. And the people who want an easy life are denying the path of wisdom. Will Allah give ease? Sure. How will He give it? When will He give it? That's not a schedule He will email to you ahead of time. You will not get a notification on your phone, Yusr is coming in 3 days. He is not going to do that. That's not how that works. You know, the best of the believers were like, Mata Nasrullah. When is the help of Allah coming? When is it coming? Allah says, it's near. If you say somebody is near, how near though? Can you give me a little bit, like, do we have projections? Months? Are we talking months, years, hours? Can we get a little bit of, no, you can't. وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُطْلِعَكُمْ عَلَى الْغَيْبِ. Allah doesn't owe to you that He should tell you something about the unseen. He doesn't owe you that, right? That's actually maturity, isn't it? It's a mature view of life. Trials will come. Allah has given you the strength and the wisdom to navigate those trials. The purpose of guidance is not to make life easy. The purpose of guidance is not to, the storms will stop. The purpose is you can navigate the storms. Now you know how to cross through the storm with strength. Not that the storm will disappear, right? So with that, inshallah, I'm going to give you guys your first break, and then we'll talk about how the Christians talked about wisdom, the Jews talked about wisdom, how the dictionary talked about wisdom. Now we're finally going to talk about how Muslim scholars talked about wisdom in early Islamic scholarship, inshallah, after the break. Barakallahu li wa lakum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.